Hello and welcome to the Kubernetes Case Files commentary. I'm your host, Glen Simon, and I'm joined by my colleague, Myles Gray. The Kubernetes Case Files is a kind of a more fun way to talk about application modernization in the context of a fictional detective story. The story will play out over a series of episodes, and after each episode, we'll add some commentary to connect the story with real life. So the story begins, as you've seen, with our detective getting hired by the CIO of a company called Legacy Bank to investigate what might be responsible for why the banking portal is causing problems with their customers. The banking portal sort of represents an older, more traditional application that doesn't just doesn't cut it anymore. They're starting to see customers defect, particularly customers maybe of a younger demographic. So let's talk, Myles. When we talk about this example of Legacy Bank, do you think this is kind of a realistic scenario? So how often, for example, do you see companies with this kind of situation?
Yeah, I think in fintech, in particular, in banking, this is something that's readily apparent because on both sides of the pond, there are really compelling upstarts in that arena. In the UK, for example, we have Monzo and Revolut. In the US, there's a couple of them as well. And personally, I moved to one of these recently, which sort of justifies our legacy banks having a problem with it. And what I found from a customer perspective of said bank was that, there was no app to manage my money. I couldn't send stuff without either getting on the phone or going into the premises or whatever. And especially over COVID, people want to do things remotely. People want to do things on their phone in the comfort of their own home. And I think all of those things put together, it's very hard for a large establishment, a large enterprise in particular, banks, because of the regulations, to keep up with modern technology and to modernize their stack because they are so heavily regulated. It doesn't make it impossible though, but I think absolutely that is one of like a cornerstone case of what it is to be disrupted as an industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly have my own experiences with my own bank, which I guess is probably more like Legacy Bank than some of these upstarts. And obviously, what we're talking about here is relevant to other industries as well. But it seems like this is it's certainly something that a lot of people can relate to. Why do you think? Well, actually, let's talk a little about modernization of the application portfolio. What kinds of things might happen to a company if it fails to modernize its applications?
Well, I mean, if we take the example of Legacy Bank here, people move their capital out of the bank into another bank that's less money that they have to do their investments and whatever with. It'll affect your bottom line. You'll lose customers, not in one big go, and it might seem sort of slow, but that it's going to be more of a death by 1,000 cuts, as it were, rather than a big event that forces people to move. So I would say it's one of those things where it's customer experience, and customer experience isn't necessarily always catastrophic, but it is something that makes people move away from your business over time. So I would say that if you fail to modernize repeatedly, and there are these other upstarts and people are going to compete with you on things that you're falling behind on, you're going to lose customers. It's going to affect your bottom line.
Mm-hmm. So it's really a bottom line issue.
Absolutely.
So why do you think so many companies or organizations fall behind in their app modernization initiatives?
I think there's some good reasons and there's some bad reasons why they fall behind. Some of the, I guess you could say, good reasons are compliance issues with banks in particular, highly regulated. That said, it hasn't stopped these upstarts from coming in the same highly regulated environment and disrupting things as well. So there must be more behind it, right? It must be people, it must be process, it must be how things are changed internally, bureaucracy, lots of different stuff. And generally what you'll find is, companies, larger companies are siloed out to make management for the top layer easier because they have managers to manage people, right? And though that siloing breeds a culture of not my problem, throw it over the wall to the other people, right? It's somebody else's problem. It's nothing to do with me. So I think there's some of that. There's some just technical debt, straight up technical debt. If you've got online banking portal and you've been in the business 200 years, like some of these banks have been, and you started your online banking thing in the late 90s, the early 2000s, you were a fast mover then, but you've built on that over years, and now you've got this great big monolith of a thing that you have to contend with to try and modernize anything. And that's not easy, 20 years of development in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think as we'll see as the story plays out, we kind of sort of take some of those examples and show how it's not one particular area of it's a combination of many things that make this problem so difficult. The sort of upstart banks you were talking about, in a sense they have a built-in advantage because they don't have that bureaucracy and all those layers and all those different silos to contend with. All right, well, thanks, Myles. And thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of the Kubernetes Case Files commentary. Join us next time for continued commentary on the story. Bye.